appreciate you. I did capture the name of that book, so I've got it in the notes for the day.
1,000 Names for Joy. Well, thank you for that, and have a wonderful show.
Thank you. You have a good one. So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Wednesday, March the 3rd, 2021. And our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we would love to hear your comments and your questions because that makes this your show. We'll give Michael just a minute to get dialed in, and I'll direct you to our website, which is whyagain.org. And there are lots of information. We've added a lot of new things out there, so put the tools to work in your life. And I'm getting a text from somebody. Let me just make sure it's not someone saying that they're in. Okay. He was just asking me if I wanted to share some of the dynamics and the discussions from my experience in my healing process. So I'll wait till he gets on. So we're adding a new section, it's not ready yet, to the website so that if you wanted to send somebody a link just to give them kind of the synopsis of the work, then there'll be one link, one page where they can go, and there'll be several links within that page. So hopefully that will be available so you can send it out to folks to introduce them to the work. And I hear Michael breathing, so I know he's back on with us. Welcome.
Yes, breathing.
Sound like Darth Vader.
What an awesome, sweet thing to have the opportunity to do, to breathe. What a gift it is that we have this thing called a human life. And I'm not sure, sweetie, how much you've said about the fact that on Monday you played a repeat show so that we had some space for some of the processing you were in, but I thought I might share a little bit about that and
Sure.
And some of our insight and conversation this morning. I know I got a big piece of understanding this morning in our processing of some of that. But in any event, Jeanie had been doing some work and doing a lot of breathing, and it just had a huge opening of that direct connectedness to love. And it didn't seem reasonable to pull her away from that. So I suggested we play a show so that she didn't have to focus on the switchboard and the mechanics of things. And you had a day and a half almost of just being in that connected space, which is really pretty awesome. We see that happen on occasion for people, and the more committed one is to one's work, the more they tend to spend time in that space. And so it was just interesting this morning talking, and Jeanie had noticed a couple of times through the night after being in that connected space, a couple of times dreams coming in. It was like she'd moved into a space where what we've been referring to as the non-being mind, shut up, love is present, physiological direct experience, which is, my description of where we're designed to live. And that as, that direct experience became a little more distant, she was able to catch, the non-being mind coming back online, coming back up and going, hey, wait a minute, what about me? I need to run the show. Just touched into 2 or 3 things that were, we were able to share and just support, recognize, we've talked a lot over the years about becoming a thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions. And so she was able to share with me as, a dream came up and she awakened from it. And there was some of that non-being stuff wanting to come back in. And, okay, so just be here to support you and breathe through it and let go of that one and let go of that one. And what occurred to me was that For me, I had my first really deep, direct opening experience of that type back when my daughter was born. She's now, I don't think she likes to hear me say the words, but 40. And so she's been circling the earth for about 40 years now. And when she was born and her head delivered into my hands, she opened her eyes, total focused look in my eyes, and grinned at me and literally put me into that space. And you've maybe heard me talk about that previously, and that later I learned that the state I was in was actually a state that there are certain Buddhist traditions that work to produce that impact, and that was to have no mind. And in that state, I had no mind. I couldn't think of thought. I couldn't think of carbon-based type thought. It just was, silly to even go there. And I can remember in that opening where it was just pure, deep presence of love, I could ask a question, and I was given a direct visual picture type answer and a silent but auditory explanation. It was described to me. One of the things that happened was that I asked in that state, well, what about the ego? And I was instantly shown this little playful puppy with some kind of a trinket or toy in its mouth, jumping around trying to get my attention. And I can remember just so clearly, as that happened, when I asked that question, this little puppy is just jumping around trying to get my attention and got something in its mouth, and it's like, hey, look at me, look at me. And I can remember so clearly just looking at it and going, are you kidding? I'm going to give this up for that? And then what I realized is, because I didn't have the brain cells, I didn't have, I was just starting into the Aramaic forgiveness process at that point. That's about when I began working with the Aramaic. And so I didn't have the support. I didn't have the awareness. I didn't have anybody around that knew what was going on. And I can see how, having had that experience, if I'd have known, I'd have been able to stay with that experience. But not knowing, not understanding, and not having somebody there to support me, I can see how the non-being mind came back online and, went back to business as usual. It actually took about a year before, when I had that first opening, to get back to where things that prior to that, things based in hostility or fear, had any meaning for me. And, just not having the awareness, the understanding, the tools, the support, fell back into it. And I just realized that as we were talking about that this morning, as Jeanie's noticing her non-being mind, coming up with things, and we were able to process it, where there is support. We were just in that space together. And just the reminder, so step back and watch it in operation. Watch how it's trying to come back online. Watch how it wants to come back in and run your life. And it was just like, oh my God. Not that it was in any real sense wasted, because it was all the learning experience, but I think now, if I'd have had that support and I had someone that knew what was going on, I could have saved myself 40 years, to get to the point that the work has come now. So it was just a really, for me, a pretty profound insight, and I realized that, in the objective of this radio show is to, of course, extend the work to every mind, heart, and being on the planet, ultimately. And, as each person, and as you're doing your work, there are varying degrees of openings. There are times when, I might just crash, using forgiveness, crash in hostility and fear-based reality and step back to a connected space of love. It may not be a big major event as that opening I'm describing and the one that Jeanie just had, but it's an event. And, when the support is here, the idea of the conversation that we're having continuously, and, I like the line in the Course in Miracles that says, it would be interesting if you were to realize that all symbols of the world are meaningless, but then you were asked to take a teaching function and come back and use the words that the world of darkness rules. In other words, the words of hostility and fear, but use them only to proclaim their unreality in terms that still have meaning in that world that darkness rules. And so I'm realizing how important a piece of the puzzle that is. And, our ongoing conversation with callers who called in, and what is it that we're working to do to support people in letting go of that unreality. I got a call from a friend this morning, and I'm going to ask everybody if they would hold the space. I don't know if there's anybody these days listening to the show that new friends of mine up in Toronto, Canada, but there's a fellow named Sam Mirshak who has been a friend of mine for, 45 years or more. And his wife called me this morning to tell me that he'd passed away last night. So I'll ask you to hold Sam and Flora in your hearts and just take a second and hold the space for them and for him as he moves on from his journey, and for her as she processes the pain she's experiencing, the sensations of loss. And as we were able to process, she's called just for some support. She's a family friend. They've done my work from the very earliest days, actually, closer to 50 years ago that I met them. And, before I started to do the forgiveness work. But it was sweet because she was in the space open for support. At one point she spoke about, and he was a pretty awesome guy, very close friend, one of my closest friends, and she spoke about how awesome a person he was. And I said, no, he was not an awesome person. He is. He's not in his body, but he is. The unreality of this thing called death. Yes, not physically present. Interesting, in the Aramaic language, the word death means present elsewhere. If I went into a store, and let's say we've got some friends that have a store that has multiple locations. I said, hey, where's Bill today? And they'd say, if they were Aramaic, they might say he's dead. That wouldn't mean he's left his body. It would mean he's present elsewhere. So it might mean he's at one of the other locations. And so it was just a really sweet, energetic moment with her to give up the thought he was and to tap into he is. And as she did that, much of the conversation, it had been a pretty traumatic couple of months, some pretty dramatic, invasive side effect latent treatments that he got into with having had lung cancer and metastasizing to his brain and surgery and radiation and chemotherapy. And it was just pretty difficult. But as she was able to shift that one thought, her whole conversation shifted to the many very connected, sweet moments that they had in this last couple of months, rather than the whole focus on the pain and trauma that they went through. And so, our whole objective here is to take everything that we have in language that's passed on to us that is a perceptual construct of the mind, but is not necessarily true in the actuality. There's an interesting video, and you can look it up as an interview. I think the interview is something titled "The Best Interview Ever," and it's with an MD named Zach, Z-A-C-K, Bush, B-U-S-H. If you look that up on YouTube and give it a listen, Dr. Bush talks about his experience on one particular night shift that he was working as an MD, and he had 3 people who died, who went through clinical death, and was able to resuscitate them. And he talks about how, as he resuscitated these three people, all three of them were somewhat upset with him and were in the space of, why did you bring me back? And all three of them, and I guess he shared this particular night because there were three different people that had the same experience, all three of them, when he brought them back, spoke of how for the first time in their lives, of course, people would call this clinical death, but the first time in their lives at death, they each experienced being fully accepted for the first time in their lives, and were somewhat disturbed at being pulled out of that experience and back into this so-called physical reality with its perceptual constructs. And he posited, as a medical doctor's thought, it's like, why are we waiting until death to have this experience? Like inviting people to do something about it, step in and do their work. And that's exactly what we're here to do, is to support those constructs of the mind based in hostility or fear, the non-being mind that runs so many lives, to support the weakening of those things, those energetic patterns, and the strengthening of the presence of truth. And the truth is, and it's easy to verify, just go back to the moment where you held a newborn child. Tap into the essence of that child and notice the truth about them is that they are love. They're not doing love. They're not loving you. They are love. That's the truth of each and every one of us. And with our cultural traditions, we tend to knock the awareness of the child being love out of mind with our own goals for them, the things we think they should understand, the things we think they should do, and people start to turn their hostility-based language, their fear-based language toward the child until the child buys in and, like the ancestors, do not function fully as love. They think love means something to do with self-sacrifice or sexual athletics or any of the other crazy games that are out there. And coming back to the truth of who we are, coming back to function as the human beings that we are, is of course the whole objective of this work. The whole reason we've been on this show for 10 years and plan to continue. To keep the movement, to keep the awareness of the presence of love active for each and every person who listens. And if we go back to the, this whole conversation ties into our reading from Why Is This Happening to Me Again? If you're new to the show, we've been reading a small piece of my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, at the opening of each show, or most of them. And we're on the chapter entitled The Evidential Mind, if you happen to have the book handy, on page 41. And we're talking here with Richard, the evidential mind, and the fact that the mind, like a computer, can just spit up whatever is resonating. And if I say, don't think about the color of your car, what moves in your mind but the color of your car? If life comes along with some form of hostility or fear-based language or experience, or something that the mind interprets out of that, then like a computer, through resonance, evidence comes forward, and the mind literally constructs the picture world that you think you see outside of you. And so we're working with Richard and being able to understand, that's something my mind does, but I am not my mind, and I am not the content of my mind. When I can step back again, become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions, then I can delete, I can remove those voices, oftentimes generational, maybe going on in our bloodline for 100 generations. I can remove those voices and return to the experience of who I am as love. And so we're talking about what in Aramaic is called a tuv, or an attitude of mind. And, that when the attitude of mind is based in hostility or fear, then the mind gives a certain kind of perceptual construct. So I'm reading or speaking to Richard and saying, if a mind's quote-unquote blame program reads, find the guilty party and make sure it is someone else, the reality showing up in that mind can only reflect evidence that is contained in brain cells and is consistent with the program. This is the non-being mind we're talking about coming online. All other information, internal or external, is gated out or blocked out of awareness. It is simply not available to use in building the mind's current reality. If no consistent information is resonated by the actuality being focused on, the mind will hallucinate the needed evidence out of the past and attach it to the reality generated. And, this is a transparent process. And when we're stuck in some form of hostility or fear-based perceptual construct, we say we look out through our eyes and we see something happening. What we say we see is really a product of brain cells firing and a construct of the mind. And that construct, for the average person in today's world, becomes a replacement for the direct experience of actuality. And what we're inviting Richard to do is to recognize that that's changeable, that we can do something different than that. So I asked him the question, if you ever had someone, quote unquote, see you do something you didn't do, or again, quote unquote, hear you say something you did not say. The computer must be reprogrammed, or a new program must be loaded in order to access information that is different from what is currently available. In a similar fashion, we must direct our minds to close the quote-unquote blame program and open the responsibility program if we are to see situations, others, and ourselves differently. And that just ties right into the conversation. That to me was a meaningful insight this morning to realize that if I'd had the support and somebody known what was going on when my daughter was born, it would have changed the next 40 years of my life. And to just have the awareness of what the mind is doing and the support for changing it, to me, is monumental. If your mindset or program is, I'm right, you're wrong, it's settled, why argue? Your mind can only use information proving you're right in building the reality about you. It can only use information that proves another's error to build a reality about them. Any bias renders the mind incapable of providing accurate information about the actual world. And so what we're looking to do here is to each time that you or I have, whether it's a mini experience of the connection to love or a big major opening like Jeanie had, that was kind of like one of those major life-changing type things, to recognize that connectedness is the truth about our lives, and the non-being mind, like that playful puppy I described earlier, will wave around one of its hostility and fear-based realities, little, toys and trinkets, and try to get your attention and pull you back to it. Our invitation to you is, when it does, do another forgiveness process, quiet it down, remove its hostility or fear, and return to the truth of who you are. And whatever the circumstance is, the truth of who you are never changes. The truth of who you are is eternal. You are the active presence of love. That's all. Verify that for yourself by holding the newborn child and tapping into the essence of the newborn. Again, notice the newborn isn't loving you. The newborn is love. If we've been given messages by our power person that are based in something other than love, because our power person had a power person, had a power person, had a power person, and we bought those messages, then the mind formed an image of self based on those messages that is a lie. And we're here to support each and every person who participates in the show to free themselves of the lie. The lie that you are anything to do with any form of hostility or fear. And return to the truth of, oh yes, I forgot. I'm based in love. My mind, after me having that experience, wants to come back online with its old hostility and fear gruff garbage. And it's time to be able to breathe and soften and open. Observe yourself in operation. There was a really wonderful moment this morning with Jeanie as she realized that, a fear thought was coming, and so you would share a little bit about that. And she just immediately noticed her body was tightening up and wanted to hold on to that, and was able to share it and breathe and with support, just let it go. And it's such a powerful place to be. Do you have anything to share about that, sweetie?
Yeah, it was, for a couple of days, just, I was in bed 40 hours. I'm going to mute you, Michael, since you're noisy on that end.
Okay.
Just being in that space and actually, like, my neck has never felt better than it feels right now. But in breathing, I don't think I have ever breathed that deep or that well. I had asthma at one time and was able to get past that by doing the work, and after I met Michael and quit using an inhalator, but still never able to take that deep of a breath. And so, it was just awesome and feeling totally connected and physically feeling sensations through my body and stuff. And then during the night, I kept having different dreams that would wake me up, and just a couple of messages that actually came to me. And they all had to do, because I felt like, like Michael said, like carbon-based memory was coming back in, and, I was like, okay, I guess my dreams are the next level. But one of the messages I was given was, you will expand in 5 measures. And I thought, what does that mean? And so I sat and looked up last night, and it was, to me, it was profound. But a measure, of course, in music has to do with the beats and the tempos and things like that. But it is a digestible, it's a way of composing a song in measures to make it digestible sections that help the person to be able to perform as intended. So I took that it was, that in measures it was going to be step by step, and that, I couldn't do it all at once. And of course we know what expand means, to go into a fuller version of yourself. And I said, well, what's the importance of 5? Why 5 measures? And the number 5 is referred to as the number of humanity. It is also a symbol of balance, and it is also a symbol of individualism, courage, and important life lessons. And the last one was that it's a symbol of God's grace. And then it said 5 times 5 makes it grace upon grace. And so then later during the night, I had another dream, And when I came out of it, I told Michael, I said, oh, my gosh, I'm turning into you, because a lot of times during the night, he'll get a download, and he sits up with his phone and starts writing it down, which is a good thing because you wouldn't remember it in the morning. And so one of the messages that I got after a short dream, and I woke up and I wrote it down, and it was, even saints have long pipelines, which to me means they have long, a lineage. There's ancestry stuff, generational stuff that you have to deal with. And then I had another dream, and I was trying to put a paper cover on a book, and I was having a challenge getting it to go around both outer pieces of the book and to stay in place. And the message I got was, you can't put a cover on the book. You have to read each chapter and each page, and you can't read it all at once. You have to read it a bit at a time, and the book is about you. And so all of those messages came to me that this is just going to take time, and I'll go layer by layer, and I'm not done with it. And like Michael said, one dream I woke up and there was fear, and it was about somebody breaking into the house, and I noticed my hands were tight, my neck was getting tight, and just to breathe and to consciously say, okay, loosen, soften, and just be with it. And so to me it was powerful.
It was powerful from out here too, sweetie. It was pretty profound, such a privilege to be a part of the process, and the energy, the sweetness that was there and came through. It was just really quite awesome. Thank you. Thanks for the privilege of being part of it. There. Your willingness. Yeah, sweet.
Thank you. And we do have a hand up, and I believe it's Miss Lisa, 406. You're on the air.
Let's say hello, young lady.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thanks. So I just wanted to start off with saying that the Course in Miracles lesson today is, forgiveness is my function as the light of the world. So back to my challenge. So I got a message from my mom yesterday that my daughter, who is graduating law school, is only getting 4 tickets for her graduation. And not only is she not inviting my mom, she's not inviting me either. And then my mom also said that my youngest son is graduating high school, which obviously I knew, and that there's only one car that's included in that graduation where they drive past, and I'm not invited to that. And, of course, I still haven't seen any of my children. And so last night, and then there was something else, I can't remember. But so I was up all night, and I was trying to live, in the moment. So I would catch my thoughts. But I have to say that I was down to the darkest space that I could be, and just pondering, if I know I have to do all the above. I know the answer. But, if I never see my children again, what's the point of this life? I just don't know.
Any one of your children, when you birth them, and you go back to the moment where you first held them, and you tap into their essence, what is that essence?
That's the love.
Okay.
That we all are.
If you thought about one of your children that you birthed, now let's think about the second one. What word would describe them?
He was, he was just the sweetest thing in the whole world.
And if you think about the third child, what word would you use to describe them?
Again, the sweetest most wonderful thing in the whole wide world.
If we held you in your newborn state, what word would you use to describe you, do you suppose, would we use?
Oh, my mom will tell you I was the sweetest thing in the whole wide world.
There's the point. That hasn't changed, Lisa. That hasn't changed. You've taken on the generational pain and trauma, but the truth about you hasn't changed. So my offering would be the first.
To live, Michael, if I don't ever see them again. I mean, I know I can write the mind shifter on it, but I mean, God dang it! How am I supposed to live?
Yeah.
I'm 9 miles from them. I'm 9 miles from the boys, and I haven't seen them in 11 years.
Yeah, I hear your pain. That's a big loss. And I breathe with you.
And I can, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if you went back and had the conversation with your father and your mother, your mother's father and mother, your father's father and mother, and their parents before them, how far back do you suppose you would find experiences based in loss and pain and trauma? I mean, can you think of, if you just went those 3 generations, mom, grandparents, great-grandparents, could you point to any one of them that lived without loss and pain and trauma?
No.
Do you suppose there was one in the generation before that?
I'm sure everyone had equal or more, so at least what we rated down.
Yeah. So my offering would be, and I hear the practical, face-to-face desire to hold and to be with your children. I can't fathom. I have the blessing of still having my children in my life. But my offering would be that there's been a building through your generations and mine, Jeannie's, and everybody else who's listening. There have been generational patterns of pain built, and the mind takes hold of that and makes that our evidential reality. And that evidential reality is what cuts us out of experiencing ourselves and others as who we are. And out of that state, we create all kinds of experiences that lead to things like the separation you've been experiencing, the separation from your former husband, and the trauma of that. So my offering would be, the point is that you being the early adopter, the first one in your family's bloodline that said, I can do something about this. And I think back to, the first time you came to Heartland and some of our conversations and conversations in this vein, and I look at and I listen to the level of trauma you were in back then about it, and I listen to the level of trauma you're in today. You've moved light years, but you're the early adopter that, on some level, I can only assume, said, all right, well, I'm going to take this on and I'm going to clean it up. And you've been cleaning it up. And you're not finished.
Well, last night I wasn't.
I understand. I hear you.
And then as the file folder opened, then it's like, well, I don't even like Ohio. I don't even like Akron. I don't even want to be here. And yet, Bob provided for us this beautiful house that we can afford, that if something should happen to him, that I can afford. It's everything that anybody would ever want, but yet I'm ready to run. and because it's all the other because that's what I do. I run.
Right.
And,
I say that's
so,
what you used to do?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, cool.
That's right.
So notice that, if we went back when you first came to Heartland a decade or so ago, and we were having this conversation, it would be endless, complete breakdown in trauma. And notice that about 45 seconds ago, as you made reference to, well, it wasn't that way last night, you were actually able to laugh. You couldn't have done that. I bet if we had a conversation and got your mom and your dad into their matching traumas, not obviously the same as yours, but whatever it was for them, there wouldn't be a laugh in their voice. They wouldn't have been able to stop for a second and go, oh, yeah, man, phew. And if we talk to your grandparents and I'm talking about all of us, there wouldn't have been the possibility of even that little intermission you got from the pain to laugh about how you saw your behavior just last night. So my offering is you've made monumental progress. And as Jeanie said, the download she got was that her process was going to be in 5 measures, and that, and then, even saints have a long pipeline, have a history to work through, and it's not going to be done overnight. And when I say it's not going to be done overnight, I talk of myself, and I've been doing this work for 50 years, and I don't proclaim to be finished. And I can see places, as I spoke about earlier, 40 years ago when I had that opening experience with my daughter, but I didn't have the wherewithal to hold on to it. It was like an awesome reprieve from an insane mind in an insane world. And I didn't know how to hold on to it. I've done 4 decades of work from then, so I've gotten a lot better at holding on to it and supporting others, being able to unwrap themselves from the mind energy of trauma that is generational and help to lead people out of that desert, out of that state of unconsciousness. And when you finish your journey through the desert, you'll awaken to the fact that you are the sweetest, most wonderful being created, like we all are. And from there, I don't know what your relationships are going to look like with your children or your mother or anybody else, but I know that your relationship with yourself is going to change as you unload those generational patterns that we've pretty much all bought into. And knowing the importance of breathing and letting loose of that, and noticing that you could just zero right into that. I shared how last night Jeanie, again, she had another dream, and she woke up and she was like, my hands are wanting to tighten. There's fear starting to move. And we were able to just breathe, and it's like, okay, so rather than letting that get a hold of you, take a breath and remember what you've just been through and who you are. And she was able to do that. Now, maybe I'm telling something a little bit out of school, but usually when Jeanie gets up in the morning, she has difficulty getting her fingers to open. They're tight. And she caught it last night and was able to just let go of it, and her hands turned totally soft right there on the spot. It was like a major piece of work, and processing through something that, those things have got most of us by the face most of our lives. And you choosing to be an early adopter in the field, in the family system, perhaps you're the one that's going to give the whole family system the gift. Like perhaps instead of carrying on the family tradition of marriage, trauma, divorce, separation, and loss, maybe you're going to open the space, even if you never saw their faces again, energetically, genetically, for those 3 kids to be free of that and create relationships out of being, because you put that in the bloodline. To me, That sounds like a pretty worthy vision and purpose, even if I don't get what I want. And I can see how, like I've done myself, when I'm not getting what I want, how I could go into this full-blown insane mind. And notice it hasn't got nearly the grip on you that it used to have, and you're in process. And with the amount of work you've done in the last 10 years, notice there's a whole new level of awareness. We're having this conversation.
So I told the young one, last time I talked to him, I didn't talk to him, I texted with him, and I told him that I had confidence in him. I trusted him to make his own decisions, his own choices. Obviously, I used the higher word.
Right.
And I said, and if you choose never to see me again, I have to trust that's what's right for you. And I've never heard from him again. And I have to follow what I said. I mean, I can write the mind shifter. It's fun, easy, and healing for me to never see my kids again in this lifetime. I can write it myself.
Sounds like a perfect mind shifter to work with. You've been practicing creating those mind shifters, haven't you?
Yes. But I don't believe it.
And so maybe you want to change that thought you planted with him. Maybe you want to let go of that one.
So how would I restructure that?
Well, I think that mind shifter you just repeated would be a perfect one to start with, and maybe another or a different type of opening communication with him is appropriate, whether it's by text or by phone, and maybe shifting instead of a conversation that's based in fear of loss. Well, if I never see you again, then I guess I'll have to take that as okay. Maybe a different quality of conversation, of acknowledging, the sweetness of his being and your first experiences of him, and the recognition that he and everyone in his life are made of that same stuff. And that connection and communication is safe and healing. And maybe that different vibration planted will open a different space, because I can certainly see, I know that, I was privy to some of the communications between your former and yourself, had the experience of some of it, so I could imagine that some of the things that were said about you to your son by him were probably not very kind to you. And with what I could imagine having been planted in his brain, I could imagine that he could hear the words, well, if you decide to never see me again, I'll have to trust that that's right for you. I could imagine him hearing that as my mother's saying she doesn't want anything to do with me. I can imagine his mind constructing that kind of a reality out of that statement. Not what you intended at all, not what your reality was, but with the biases implanted in his mind through those conversations with his dad. I can imagine that's what his brain might generate. And maybe the kind of grief you're experiencing right now is the kind of grief he went through when he heard that and went, I guess she doesn't want to hear from me because she just told me she'd be okay if I never saw her again.
I have texted him since, and he's not the one who responds anyway. The middle child does, and but there's been, you know, I sent him his name is Kaylee, and I sent him a Kaylee Ryce video the other day, and it's this beautiful song, a Hawaiian song, but so I have reached out afterwards because I didn't hear from him that that's what I choose, you know, that's what I decide. So I just don't know. And then I'll set that one aside. So my mom, who stayed in contact with Marvin, she says that she is coming for his graduation, and so she's invited, and so they want to stay in a hotel, which, like I said, I'm only 9 miles from them, and then she's asking if she can stay here, and I'm like, you know, you can stay here, but how? I mean, it just is so contrived. It feels so contrived to me that my mother would walk out my front door to go to my child's graduation, who I haven't seen. I just,
you know, and I can hear that your perceptual construct about that would be totally based in unresolved trauma with mom. And would you be willing to give that? I mean, I can see where that would be a very valid perspective, and a lot of people could stand around and look at that reality, that construct, and go, boy, you're so right about that. Or would you rather dissolve that one and simply be the presence of love in that experience?
And I can see that. I can see that side of it, you know, being that love, sending them off with love, and yet that's really
it's a tough one.
So I always put off. I always am the quote unquote better person. When I nursed my children for 2.5 years, I didn't take I wanted to sleep at night, but I got up and I nursed them, and I took care of them, and and my former husband, I would put myself out, and I would be quote unquote the better person, and I want to be that space, and yet what about me?
Yeah. Have there ever been times when you haven't been the better person?
Yes, absolutely.
So I support you doing your work around forgiving that, because I can, you know, the mind could certainly take that. Well, look at all the effort, look at all that I've done, and I'm not getting any reward, and move yourself into a victim role again. And, you know, Jeanie and I just watched the other night the movie from 1971. We realized it's 50 years ago, and it was called Love Story, where the line is repeated twice in the movie, and you've heard me refer to it in teaching before. Love means you never have to say you're sorry. And as you can incarnate in a family system that's had a lot of trauma as the presence of love, maybe all of that victim stuff is what you're going to need to give up to do it. And it may not produce the result you'd like to see, which would be your next worksheet, but incarnating fully in your own physiology as love and giving up the family system's victimhood games might be the purpose of this lifetime in your eternal life.
I mean, I know that that's a possibility.
So would you rather go for that possibility or trauma?
I need to drop the goal.
So which would you prefer? That possibility and doing what it takes to produce it, or continuing along the line of, and I hear you're justified. You know, I've interacted in the family system, and I've seen the injustice that's there. And I could, not fault you if you chose to make a case for that injustice. And the other side of the coin is, it's your choice. You could do that, or you could forgive that and live in and as the presence of love, what you started out with, the same essence that you see those 3 children having started out with. And, noticing how they started out in that sweetness, and they fell prey to a family system that wasn't so sweet. So you could continue, the family system dynamics that aren't so sweet, or you could choose to forgive them and carry into that family system that perhaps hasn't seen it for 100 generations, that you could carry into that family system the pure, total presence of being and of love. And that, I would offer, would be its own reward, aside from what it will do to the whole family system. And I hear it's a big piece of work. It's a tough piece of work, especially for a mom. I can't fathom the kind of connectedness that comes from a woman having carried a child in her body and given birth to it. I can't fathom what that connectedness has to be as a man.
But
I can
obviously I had some knowledge that they were going to not be with me, because I used to sleep. I co-slept with them, but I slept with them physically on my body because I wanted to be with them so much. I slept with them on my back. I didn't put them in another bed.
Well,
I know we're running short, but
no, we're cool. We're on track. And I relate to that fully. The first night my son was born, I never in my life could sleep on my back. We were both exhausted, and for 12 hours I laid with him on a bed, and he was on my chest the whole night, and neither of us moved a muscle. So I can relate to that energy and that connectedness. Which energy are you going to perpetuate is the question you have to ask yourself.
And I think one of my friends said to me, are you saying that you would rather? No, I won't go there. But
okay.
Okay.
You're at a crossroads. You can go in either direction right now. And you know what I'm going to support you in.
I know the one that's the piece. I know the one that is not just right, in the mind. I know the one that I know the one that is not just right, in the mind. I know the one that I would have chosen to come in to do, but it's not any fun.
I hear you. I understand that one. I mean, I can't imagine the depth of it, but, I hear you. And forgiveness at this point is going to look like canceling your need to see them. Because notice, when you load that goal in your mind, how much trauma it brings up.
Yeah.
And you've got to clear that trauma out if you're going to have the hope of creating a space where there's an attractive field to reconnect and make that connection.
Yes.
And the show is going to cut us off in a minute or so, and that's okay. We'll just let it run until it cuts us off, and just know we're here holding the space with you and supporting you.
Well, I'll just end it with last night. Patrick popped up in the memories, and so I just wanted, he was just our friend. Is our friend.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank
Sweet.
you for the help. Support.
We are here holding the space, holding you in our hearts,
Okay.
and acknowledge your
Guys,
courage,
have a great-
your willingness. All right,
Thanks.
blessings.
Thank you.